The hidden trap of manipulation. In the quiet shade of an ancient temple, a gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the tall Bodhi tree. Beneath it, a wise monk sat in tranquil stillness. His robe, a warm golden hue, draped gracefully around him. His face, serene and kind, seemed to glow with a light that came from within. His hand held a string of prayer beads, which he slowly moved, one by one, with each breath. But this monk was not always this peaceful. Once, he too had been caught in the invisible web of manipulation, not from others, but from his own mind. Have you ever felt a quiet discomfort? A sense that your choices weren't entirely your own? Have you ever found yourself agreeing to things you didn't want? Trapped in conversations you should have walked away from? Or feeling guilty without understanding why? Perhaps you've tried to please everyone, sacrificed your own happiness, or stayed silent when you should have spoken up. These are not just random habits. They are signs of a deeper, hidden trap, the subtle, psychological prison of manipulation. Manipulation isn't always obvious. It doesn't always wear the face of a bully or an enemy. Sometimes, it wears the smile of a friend, the voice of a loved one, or even the gentle whisper of your own mind. And the most dangerous kind of manipulation is not what others do to you, but what you unknowingly do to yourself. Watch your thoughts, for they become words. Watch your words, for they become actions. Watch your actions, for they become habits. Watch your habits, for they become your character. And watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. But what if the thoughts you carried were never truly your own? What if your beliefs, your desires, even your fears, were shaped not by your true self, but by the invisible hands of others? What if, without even realizing it, you had become a puppet in a script you never wrote? This is the hidden prison of manipulation. A prison where the bars are made of invisible thoughts, emotions, and beliefs planted by others. And the warden is none other than your own mind. But the good news is, there is a way out. And this monk, who once struggled in that prison, found his way to freedom, not by running away, not by fighting the world, but by looking within, by mastering his own mind. In this video, we will embark on a journey together, guided by the wisdom of this monk, exploring 12 powerful insights drawn from the depths of Buddhist philosophy. Insights that will not only help you recognize the hidden traps of manipulation but also teach you how to break free from them. These are not just spiritual teachings. They are practical, powerful principles that you can apply in your daily life to protect your peace, reclaim your mind, and awaken to your true self. But before we begin, if you find this content valuable, please consider subscribing to our channel, Buddhism in Every Moment. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful, life-changing content like this. 1. Build a strong identity. The monk's journey began like many others, with a deep sense of confusion. He remembered a time when he felt lost, when the opinions of others were like chains around his heart. He would change his words to avoid conflict, smile when he didn't feel joy, and apologize for things he never did wrong. He was living as a reflection of others' expectations. One evening, as the sun set over the temple, the monk's master spoke to him. "You must become the mountain, not the weather," he said. "The mountain does not tremble when storms rage. It does not change when the sky is clear or cloudy. It simply is, grounded, unmoved." The monk didn't understand at first, but in the quiet solitude of his meditation, the truth began to reveal itself. His problem was not that others controlled him. It was that he did not know himself. His thoughts, his feelings, even his desires, they were not truly his. They were echoes of voices he had heard all his life. Buddhism teaches that nothing can harm you as much as your own unguarded mind. But the monk realized his mind had never been guarded because he had never truly known it. So he began a practice that would change his life forever. He would sit in silence each morning, not to escape the world, but to meet himself. He would ask himself, "Who am I?" And when thoughts arose, he did not chase them. He watched them. When emotions stirred, He did not drown in them. He observed them. Slowly, he began to see the difference between his true self and the roles he had been playing for others. He began to understand his values, not just what he wanted, but what he would never allow. He wrote them down, his boundaries, his principles, and each day, he would reflect on them, strengthening his understanding of who he was. And as his identity grew stronger, the power of others over him began to fade. The praise that once thrilled him, the criticism that once crushed him, they became like the wind against the mountain, unable to shake him. You must know yourself, for only then can you guard your mind, his master told him, and when you guard your mind, you guard your life. 2. Practice emotional self-control. The monk had begun to understand himself. He had grown aware of his values, his principles, and his true identity. But there was another battle yet to be fought, the battle against his own emotions. It happened one quiet morning in the temple courtyard. As the monk swept the fallen leaves, another young monk approached him, his face twisted in anger. Without warning, the young monk began shouting, accusing the wise monk of stealing his prayer beads, a false accusation born from misunderstanding. The old monk stood there, listening, his face calm as the spring breeze. He did not raise his voice, did not defend himself. He simply watched, as though observing the passing clouds. When the young monk finished, he sighed, storming away, his anger still boiling. Later, another monk approached the old master, bewildered. How can you remain so calm when he accused you so unjustly? He asked. Aren't you angry? The old monk smiled gently. Anger is like hot coal, he said. You may wish to throw it at another, but you are the one who burns first. This lesson was not easily won. In his younger years, the monk too had been quick to anger, quick to take offense. A single harsh word could shatter his peace. A look of disapproval could haunt him for days. He would lie awake at night, replaying arguments in his mind, rehearsing words he wished he had spoken, feeling the sting of imagined insults. But as he deepened his practice, he began to see a simple truth. Emotions are like the wind. They come and go, but they do not have to move you. And the only way to master them was not by fighting them, but by observing them. He remembered his master's words, rule your mind, or it will rule you. Sitting beneath the great Bodhi tree, the monk began to practice a new discipline. When anger arose, he did not suppress it. He watched it. When sadness washed over him, he did not drown. He let it pass. When fear whispered in his ear, he listened, but he did not obey. Over time, he began to see his emotions for what they were, passing clouds across the vast sky of his mind. No longer did he cling to joy or flee from pain. He experienced each moment fully, but without attachment. One day, a villager came to the temple, weeping in despair. His crops had failed, his family was hungry, and he felt cursed by fate. Why must I suffer like this? The man cried. The monk listened with deep compassion, but his own peace remained untouched. My friend, he said gently, your suffering is real, but it is not eternal. Like the storm, it will pass, but you must learn not to be the storm. The villager looked up, confused. How can I not be the storm when my world is falling apart? By being the sky, the monk whispered, the sky that watches the storm, but is never touched by it. This was the monk's great mastery, the power to experience all things without being consumed by them. He did not become numb or cold. He felt joy, sorrow, fear, and love just as deeply as anyone else, but he did not become lost in them. He was the mountain, not the weather. He was the sky, not the storm. 3. Take full control of your mind. But even as the monk mastered his emotions, he knew there was a deeper enemy to be conquered, his own mind. One night, as the temple grew quiet and the lanterns flickered with soft light, the monk sat in deep meditation. But his mind was not still. It raced with thoughts, old memories, imagined fears, lingering regrets. He tried to silence them, but the more he resisted, the louder they grew. It was then that his master approached, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Why do you struggle so?" the master asked. "I cannot quiet my mind," the monk admitted. "It is like a wild horse, racing from thought to thought. I am trying to silence it, but it will not obey." The master smiled. "That is your mistake. The mind is not an enemy to be conquered. It is a tool to be understood." Leading the monk to the tranquil garden, the master pointed to the clear pond. "Look at the water. When it is still, it reflects the sky perfectly. But when you stir it, the reflection is lost. Your mind is the same. The more you fight your thoughts, the more you stir them." The monk looked at the pond, seeing his own restless reflection rippling on the surface. "But how do I make it still?" he asked. "By letting it be," the master said. "Do not chase your thoughts. Do not silence them. Simply observe them. Let them come and go. Be the witness, not the prisoner." From that day on, the monk changed his practice. He no longer tried to silence his mind. He simply watched it. He watched as thoughts rose and fell, as memories surfaced and faded, as worries came and passed like waves on the ocean. And in that quiet observation, a miracle occurred. His thoughts began to slow. His mind became clear, like the still pond reflecting the sky. No longer was he lost in his thoughts. He was the one who saw them, the awareness behind them. It was in this stillness that he discovered a great truth. Most of the thoughts he once believed were not even his. They were echoes of old fears, words spoken by others, beliefs planted by the world around him. And as he saw them for what they were, they lost their power over him. "Your mind is your servant, not your master," the monk whispered to himself. "When you rule your mind, you rule your life." But this mastery did not make the monk arrogant. It made him humble, for he saw that every person who suffered was not suffering from life, but from their own mind. And so he devoted his days to helping others see this truth, that peace is not found by escaping the mind, but by understanding it. And just as the still pond reflects the sky, his mind became a mirror, clear and calm, reflecting the true nature of reality. 4. Sometimes stepping away is necessary. There are moments in life when even the strongest monk must choose to let go. It was a season of heavy rains, and the temple grounds were lush, but the air was thick with tension. A young monk, filled with arrogance, had begun to stir conflict among his peers. He questioned the old monk's teachings, mocked the simplicity of the practice, and sowed seeds of doubt among the other monks. The old monk watched silently, his serene face betraying no emotion. He did not argue, did not defend himself. He simply continued his practice, sweeping the leaves, chanting his prayers, meditating beneath the ancient Bodhi tree. But the whispers grew louder. The young monk's words became sharper. His following grew, and the peace of the temple began to tremble. One by one, monks began to question the old master. Some left, others grew distant, and even the air seemed heavy with doubt. One evening, as the rain poured down and the wind howled through the temple corridors, the old monk stood alone beneath the great Bodhi tree. He looked up, letting the raindrops fall on his face, feeling the cold touch of each drop. His heart ached, not with anger, but with sorrow. Had he failed them? Had his teachings become too quiet, too gentle, to be heard over the noise of arrogance? Had he lost his way? In that moment, his old master's words echoed in his mind. "You only lose what you cling to." Suddenly, the truth became clear. Peace is not something you force. Wisdom is not something you shout. And just as a tree must sometimes shed its leaves to grow, he too must let go. The next morning, as the sun broke through the rain clouds, the old monk gathered his simple belongings, his robe, his prayer beads, his staff. He did not announce his departure, did not demand explanations or apologies. He simply walked away, leaving the temple behind, his steps light, his heart clear. He wandered through misty forests, along mountain trails, across quiet rivers, alone, but never lonely, for he carried with him the same peace that had always lived in his heart. In silence, he reflected on his journey, on the lessons he had learned, on the monks who had chosen doubt, and on the truth that not everyone is ready for wisdom. Weeks passed. The young monk, now seeing himself as the new master, soon found his influence slipping. His teachings, filled with pride and empty ambition, brought only confusion. The temple, once a sanctuary of peace, became a place of conflict. One by one, the monks left, seeking the quiet they had lost. One day, a group of those monks found the old master meditating by a clear mountain stream. They bowed deeply, shame and sorrow in their eyes. "Master, we were blind. We did not see the peace you offered us until we lost it. Will you not return?" The old monk smiled, his eyes warm with compassion. "My friends," he said gently, "peace is not a place. It is within you. I never left you. It was your own doubts that led you away." And so the monks sat with him, in silence, by the mountain stream. No one spoke of the past. No one needed to. In the quiet, they remembered the truth, that sometimes, the greatest wisdom is not in clinging, but in letting go. The monk's journey did not end there, for he knew that even when one finds peace, there are always new challenges, new lessons, new storms to weather. 5. Think strategically, not emotionally. As the monk grew older, his understanding deepened. He had learned to master his emotions, to calm his mind, to let go when necessary. But now he saw a deeper truth, that life is not just about avoiding suffering, but about navigating it with wisdom. One crisp autumn morning, the monk was invited to a distant village where a bitter conflict had erupted. Two families, once close friends, were now at war. Harsh words had been spoken, accusations had been made, and bitterness had taken root like a poison in the hearts of both families. The village elders begged the monk for help. He agreed, but he did not rush to speak. Instead, he spent his first days simply observing, watching the arguments, listening to the complaints, seeing the anger in the eyes of men who had once laughed together. Then, he did something unexpected. He invited the heads of both families to the village square, where a great, ancient tree stood. He handed each of them a small knife and said, "Carve your anger into this tree. Let your rage leave a mark." They were confused, but they obeyed. They carved words of bitterness, of betrayal, of hatred into the old tree's trunk. When they were finished, the monk smiled. "Now, look at this tree. Do you see the scars you have left?" he asked. "Yes," they murmured, their anger still simmering. "Come back in 1 year, and tell me what has changed," the monk said, then turned and walked away. The villagers thought him mad, but a year later, curiosity brought the two families back to the tree. To their shock, they saw that the scars were still there, but they had begun to fade, covered by fresh bark and green moss. The monk appeared, smiling gently. "The tree has healed. Though its scars remain, so too can you heal. But only if you stop carving fresh wounds." This simple lesson, that time can heal, but wisdom can prevent new pain, became the foundation of his teaching. He taught the villagers that in life, there are always two paths, the path of reaction and the path of reflection. Those who react in anger carve new scars. Those who reflect learn to heal. He taught them that thinking strategically is not about being cold or cunning. It is about seeing clearly, understanding that not every battle is worth fighting. Not every insult is worth defending against. And not every emotion is worth obeying. When you are angry, he told them, ask yourself, what will this anger build? What will it destroy? And what will remain when it is gone? The villagers learned to pause, to breathe, to choose their words with care. They learned to watch their thoughts as the monk had taught them, and to let go of those that served only to wound. The monk's presence brought peace, not because he forced it upon them, but because he showed them how to create it for themselves. And as the leaves of autumn fell around the great tree, The village, once torn by conflict, became a place of harmony. But the monk did not stay, for his journey was far from over. There were always new hearts to heal, new minds to awaken, new storms to calm. 6. Reclaim the power of silence. The wind whispered through the tall bamboo forest, and the monk walked silently among the swaying stalks, his footsteps light, his presence like a soft breeze. The forest was a place of quiet whispers, a sanctuary of stillness, and in that stillness, the monk had discovered a power that most people never understood, the power of silence. One day, a young man from a distant village came to the monk, his face twisted with frustration. "Master," he cried, "my life is filled with noise. People talk over me, argue with me, push me to react. I am always defending myself, always trying to prove my worth. How can I silence them?" The monk smiled gently, his eyes kind but knowing. "Come, walk with me," he said. They walked in silence through the bamboo forest, the only sounds being the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a bird. The young man grew impatient. His mind raced with thoughts. His heart pounded with unanswered questions. Finally, he burst out, "Master, why are we just walking in silence? This is not helping." The monk stopped and looked at him with a serene gaze. "Do you hear the wind?" he asked. "Yes, of course," the young man replied. "Does the wind argue with the bamboo?" the monk asked. The young man was silent. "Does the bamboo push back against the wind?" the monk continued. "No, it simply sways," the young man whispered. The monk smiled. "Exactly. The wind is noise, ever-changing, loud, and restless. The bamboo is silence, flexible but unbroken, strong because it does not resist. And yet, it is in that silence that the bamboo finds its strength." As they walked further, the monk began to share a story of his own youth. Once, he had been a fiery, passionate monk, eager to prove himself, to argue his wisdom against others. He spoke often, louder than the others, and believed that strength was found in winning debates, in being heard. But his master, a wise and gentle monk, rarely spoke. He listened more than he taught, smiled more than he argued, and yet his presence commanded respect. The young monk, filled with pride, once challenged his master in front of the other monks, questioning his silence. "Why do you never speak? Master, are you afraid of being wrong?" he had demanded. The old master simply smiled and said, "Words are like leaves in the wind. My child, they can be beautiful, but they are easily." The young monk was furious. He argued passionately, his voice rising, his words sharp, but the master simply stood there, calm as the bamboo in the breeze. And in that calm, the young monk saw his own anger reflected, his own foolishness exposed. It was then that he realized, his master was teaching him, not through words, but through silence, a silence that absorbed his anger without being shaken, a silence that reflected his own chaos without reacting. From that day on, the monk practiced silence. He learned to listen, not just to the words of others, but to the quiet spaces between them. He learned that silence is not just the absence of noise, but the presence of calm. And now, as he walked with the young man, he explained, "Silence is a mirror, my son. It reveals to others their own noise. When you are calm, their chaos is exposed. When you do not react, they are left to face themselves. This is the power of silence." The young man looked around at the swaying bamboo, felt the cool wind on his face, and for the first time, he understood. He did not need to silence others. He needed only to be silent himself. The monk continued his journey, leaving the young man standing in the forest. But he was not alone. He had found a new companion, the quiet strength of silence. 7. Detach from outcome and control. As the monk's journey continued, he came upon a bustling market town. Merchants shouted, children laughed, buyers haggled. It was a place of noise, of endless desire and constant struggle. But among the chaos, the monk's presence was like a calm ripple in a stormy sea. He saw a young woman arguing with a merchant over the price of a silk scarf. Her voice was sharp, her face tense, her hands clenched. She demanded a lower price. And the merchant, equally stubborn, refused. The monk approached her gently. "Why does this scarf matter so much to you, my child?" The woman turned, surprised by his calm voice. "It is beautiful, and I must have it. But he is trying to cheat me." The monk smiled. "And if you do not have it, what will happen?" I will be disappointed. I will feel cheated. I will feel that I lost." She stammered. The monk's eyes softened. "And is it the scarf that brings you peace? Or is it the belief that you must control this moment?" The woman was silent, her anger wavering. "Desire is a flame, my child," the monk continued. "The more you feed it, the hotter it burns. But peace is the water that cools it." The woman looked at the scarf, then at the merchant, and suddenly she laughed. "I have been fighting for a piece of cloth," she whispered, shaking her head. "How foolish." The merchant, too, softened, his greed melting in the warmth of her laughter. He lowered the price without being asked. And the woman, now smiling, paid him and walked away, the scarf forgotten. But the monk was not finished. He continued to speak to the merchant, who seemed puzzled by his own change of heart. "Master," the merchant said, "why did I give her the scarf for less? I am here to make a living." "Because," in her laughter, "you saw something that your gold cannot buy." The monk replied, "You saw freedom, the freedom of not needing to win." The merchant stared at the monk, then at the busy market around him. He saw how buyers argued, how sellers lied, how everyone seemed caught in a desperate dance for control. "But what am I if I do not seek profit?" he whispered. "You are yourself," the monk said simply, "not a prisoner of your own desires, not a slave to the outcome." The merchant felt a strange peace settle in his chest. He bowed deeply to the monk, who walked on, his staff tapping lightly against the cobblestones. As he walked, he whispered to himself, "Attachment is the root of suffering, not just to possessions, but to victory, to being right, to controlling the world. The true strength is in letting go, in allowing life to flow like a river, sometimes calm, sometimes wild, but always moving. And just as the river never clings to the rocks it passes." The monk continued his journey, untouched by the noise and chaos of the world. 8. Master the art of non-reaction. The monk continued his journey, his bare feet touching the cool earth, his gaze soft but steady, his heart light as the autumn leaves that danced around him. His path led him to a small village, where a heated argument had gathered a crowd. Two men stood in the center, faces red with anger, voices rising like thunder. "You cheated me," shouted one, his fists clenched. "You stole from me." "I did not," the other man roared back, his voice sharp with indignation. "You are lying." The villagers watched, some whispering, some enjoying the spectacle, but the monk did not watch the men. His gaze wandered over the crowd, their eyes wide, their breath quick, their hearts racing with the excitement of the conflict. It was as if their own emotions danced with the flames of anger before them. But the monk's heart was still, his mind as clear as the sky above. He walked slowly through the crowd and stood between the two men. At first, they did not notice him, their rage too loud, their pride too fierce. But then, without warning, the monk sat down, right there in the dirt between them, and closed his eyes. Silence fell, the shouting stopped, the men stared at the monk, confused, then at each other. The crowd murmured, but the monk did not move, did not speak. His presence was like a pebble dropped into a raging river, small, but creating ripples that spread far. One of the men laughed bitterly. "What are you doing, old man? Are you here to judge who is right?" The monk smiled without opening his eyes. "I am not here to judge. I am here to observe." "Observe?" the other man scoffed. "There is nothing to observe. He is a liar." "Perhaps," the monk replied, his voice calm as the autumn breeze. "But tell me, this anger that burns within you, where does it come from?" The men were silent, The crowd leaned closer. Is it truly about this argument? The monk continued. Or is it a flame that has been burning in your heart long before today? The men looked at each other, their expressions faltering. I once knew a man, the monk began, who would explode with anger at the smallest insult. He was like dry grass, easily set ablaze. But one day, he sat quietly by a lake, watching the water ripple beneath the soft rain, and he realized that the storm was not in the sky, but in his own heart. The crowd listened, spellbound. The men's fists slowly unclenched. This man learned something that day. The monk whispered. He learned that no one can ignite your heart without your permission. That your peace is yours, but you trade it away every time you react. One of the men, his face pale, whispered, but how can I not react? When I am wronged, when I am hurt. The monk opened his eyes, his gaze gentle but piercing. Hurt is a moment, suffering is a choice. To react is to surrender your peace. To observe is to keep it. The men were silent. The crowd, too, had grown still. The energy of anger had faded, replaced by a quiet thoughtfulness. And then, without another word, the two men turned away from each other, their anger now a fading memory. As the monk rose and continued his journey, he reflected on the nature of reaction. Most people, he knew, were like dry leaves, carried by the winds of their emotions, set ablaze by every spark. They lived as prisoners of their reactions, mistaking their feelings for their identity. But the monk understood that freedom was not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. To feel anger, but not to become it. To notice fear, but not to bow before it. To experience pain, but not to be defined by it. Emotions are like clouds, he whispered to himself, walking beneath the vast blue sky. They pass, but the sky remains. I am not the storm. I am the sky. 9. Understand the nature of illusion. The path led the monk to a grand city, a place of towering temples and bustling markets, where merchants peddled their wares and nobles rode in ornate carriages. But as he walked, he saw that the city was not what it seemed. The temples, though grand, were crumbling beneath their golden paint. The merchants smiled, but their eyes were sharp with greed. The nobles, draped in silk, whispered behind their fans, their laughter tinged with bitterness. The monk paused at the foot of a grand statue, a towering figure of a great warrior, his sword raised high, his face fierce with courage. A boy stood before the statue, staring in awe. Who is this, young one? The monk asked gently. The boy turned, eyes bright. This is the great hero of our city. Master, he defeated many enemies, saved our people, and brought us wealth and glory. The monk smiled. And where is he now? The boy's face fell. He died, long ago. And do you know who he truly was? What he loved, what he feared? The boy frowned. He was a hero. Master, that is all I know. The monk looked up at the statue. The fierce face, the shining armor, the raised sword. A hero in bronze, but a man in life. His statue is tall, but his heart was once just like yours, full of dreams, full of fears. The boy was silent, his awe fading. Remember this, my child, the monk whispered. Not everything you see is as it seems. Heroes are human. Smiles can hide pain, and the finest silk can cover an empty heart. The monk continued walking, his mind deep in thought. He saw the world as a theater, where men and women wore masks, playing roles written by their fears, their desires, their need for approval. A rich merchant boasted of his wealth, but his eyes were clouded with worry. A beautiful woman laughed with her friends, but her smile never reached her eyes. The world was an illusion, a grand performance, but the monk was not a part of it. He was the audience, watching the play with a calm smile. He remembered a story from his own youth, of a time when he had been caught in the same illusion. A young monk, eager to be seen as wise, he had spoken in grand words, quoted ancient teachings, and received praise, but his heart had been empty. His wisdom only borrowed. One day, his master had placed a mirror before him. "Look," the master had said, "this is your true teacher. It shows you your mask, but also what lies beneath." And as the young monk stared into the mirror, he saw his own eyes, not wise, but anxious, not calm, but restless. His mask crumbled, and in that moment, he began to learn. Now, as the monk walked through the city, he saw the masks of others, the illusions they wore, the roles they played, but he also saw through them. He saw the child behind the hero, the fear behind the laughter, the loneliness beneath the luxury. "I am not the mask I wear," he whispered to himself. "I am the one who sees. I am the awareness behind the illusion." And with each step, he walked not just through the city, but through the dream of the world, awake in a world asleep. 10. Strengthen your inner refuge. The monk left the bustling city behind, his steps leading him back into the quiet embrace of the forest. Towering trees stretched their arms to the sky, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind. Sunlight danced through the branches, painting patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor. The monk's path wound toward a small, tranquil lake, its surface still and mirror-like, reflecting the vast, endless sky above. He sat beside the lake, his staff resting across his knees, his prayer beads slipping gently between his fingers. Silence enveloped him, not the empty silence of loneliness, but the sacred silence of peace. Here, beneath the vast sky, surrounded by the whispering leaves and the gentle ripple of the lake, he was at home. But this peace was not always his. The monk remembered a time when his mind was a storm, a chaotic dance of thoughts and emotions that pulled him in every direction. He remembered the days when the slightest insult could wound him, when the smallest failure seemed like a mountain, when praise felt like a lifeline and criticism like a dagger. He had once been like a leaf caught in the wind, tossed and turned by the opinions of others, by the rise and fall of his own emotions. His sense of self was fragile, his peace fleeting, but over the years, he had built something stronger within, a sanctuary, an inner refuge where no storm could reach him. He had learned that true peace is not found in a perfect life, but in a protected heart. And he had built this refuge not with walls of stone, but with practices of mindfulness, with daily rituals of silence, with the quiet wisdom of his breath. As he gazed at the lake, he whispered, "Peace comes not from the absence of chaos, but from the presence of calm within." This inner refuge was like the lake before him, still, clear, and deep. No matter how fiercely the wind blew, the depths of the lake remained untouched. Leaves might fall on the surface, ripples might spread, but the depths remained calm. One day, as he sat by this lake, a young man approached, his face etched with worry. "Master, I cannot find peace. My thoughts are loud. My heart is restless. I meditate, but the noise never stops." The monk smiled gently. "When you watch this lake, do you see ripples on the surface?" "Yes," the young man replied, confused. "And do the ripples disturb the depths?" the monk asked. The young man stared at the lake, realization dawning in his eyes. "No, master, the depths remain still. Your mind is like this lake," the monk explained. "The thoughts are only ripples on the surface. Beneath them is a depth of peace that cannot be touched." The young man's shoulders relaxed, but his brow remained furrowed. "But how do I reach that depth, master? How do I find that peace?" "By returning to yourself, again and again," the monk replied. "By making this stillness your home. By creating an inner sanctuary that nothing can disturb." He told the young man of his own practice, the silent moments each morning when he would sit beneath a tree, breathing gently, letting his thoughts rise and fall like leaves on the wind. He spoke of the sacred practice of mindfulness, of simply being present with each breath, with each heartbeat. "Peace is not something you chase," the monk whispered. "It is something you return to. It is your home." And as the young man closed his eyes, breathing in the cool, fresh air of the forest, he felt a quiet stillness begin to rise within him, a stillness like the depths of the lake, vast, silent, and Unshakable. 11. Recognize and walk away from power games. Leaving the lake behind, the monk's journey brought him to another village, where he found himself amidst a crowd. At the center of this gathering stood two men, their voices sharp, their faces twisted with arrogance. They were playing a game, a contest of words, a battle of pride. The winner would be the one who could outwit the other, who could force the other into submission with clever insults and sharp remarks. The crowd cheered, laughed, and gasped with each cutting word. But the monk did not laugh. He stood silently, his calm gaze watching the game unfold. He saw not two wise men, but two desperate souls, each trying to prove their worth by diminishing the other. A young woman beside him whispered, "Master, why do they fight like this? What do they hope to gain?" "Power," the monk replied softly, "but it is an empty power, a fire that burns them even as they wield it." The young woman frowned. "But why do the people cheer for them?" "Because they, too, are caught in the game," the monk explained. "They watch, they laugh, they choose sides, believing that they are part of the victory. But they are only pawns, drawn into a conflict that feeds on their attention." As the battle of words raged on, the monk stepped forward, his quiet presence drawing curious glances. He raised his staff and tapped it lightly on the ground. The sound was soft, but it cut through the noise like a bell. "Enough," the monk whispered, his voice calm but clear. "Tell me, what do you win with these words? What do you gain by tearing each other apart?" The two men fell silent, their faces red with embarrassment. "Are you not like two men in a burning house, arguing over who started the fire?" The monk continued. "While you fight for pride, your peace burns to ashes." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others frowning. "One who is strong does not need to prove his strength," the monk whispered. "One who is wise does not need to flaunt his wisdom. And one who is at peace does not play games of power." He turned to the crowd. "Do not waste your life in games that steal your peace. Do not fight to be right while losing your truth." One of the men stepped forward, his pride crumbling, his voice shaking. "But master, what should I do? How do I defend myself without fighting?" The monk smiled. "True strength is not in the fist or the tongue, but in the heart that does not need to fight. Walk away from those who wish to draw you into their games. Let them play alone." And with those words, the monk turned and continued on his way, his steps light, his heart free, for he knew that the world was full of games, games of pride, of ego, of control. But he was no longer a player. He was a witness, a traveler who chose peace over victory. 12. Live aligned, not approved. As the monk's journey continued, he came to a small village nestled at the foot of a mountain. The people there were humble, their lives simple, but their hearts were burdened by the constant fear of judgment. In this village, every action, every choice, every word was weighed against the opinions of others. The villagers whispered about one another, their eyes sharp, their smiles thin. A young man, his face pale with worry, approached the monk. "Master, I am afraid. I try so hard to please everyone, but I always feel trapped." The monk smiled gently. "Imagine a bird," he said. "Does it sing to be praised? Does it fly to be admired?" "No, master," the young man whispered. "It sings because it has a song. It flies because it has wings. It is true to itself, and that is its freedom." The young man's eyes filled with tears. "But how can I live like that? I fear their judgment. I need their approval." The monk placed a gentle hand on the young man's shoulder. "True freedom is living from your truth, not from their opinions. Do not be the puppet of their praise, nor the prisoner of their criticism." And as the young man looked up at the mountain, its peak rising high above the village, he felt something shift within him, a lightness, a courage he had never known. "Live like the mountain," the monk whispered, silent, strong, unshaken by the winds of opinion. 13. Conclusion. True freedom lies in self-mastery. The monk's journey brought him to the peak of a great mountain. A place where the sky seemed to stretch endlessly, where the wind whispered ancient secrets, and where silence was not an absence, but a presence, vast, alive, and infinite. The monk stood at the edge of a cliff. The world spread out beneath him like a tapestry of valleys, forests, and rivers, each winding its own course, each flowing toward an unseen destination. Here, at the summit, he felt the same peace that he had found beside the tranquil lake. The same silence that had enveloped him beneath the ancient trees. The same clarity that had guided him away from the noisy games of pride and power. But here, at the highest point, this peace seemed even deeper. This silence even more profound. It was not just the peace of a quiet mind or a still heart. It was the peace of understanding. As he stood in this sacred stillness, a young seeker approached, his face a reflection of longing, his eyes filled with questions. He bowed deeply to the monk and spoke, his voice trembling. "Master, I have walked far to find you. I have heard of your wisdom, your peace, your clarity, but I do not understand. I have tried to silence my thoughts, but they return. I have tried to be strong, but I am swayed. I have tried to be free, but I am still bound. Please, Master, tell me, how do I find true freedom?" The monk smiled, his gentle gaze resting on the young man. He gestured to the vast landscape before them. "Look at the rivers below. Do they fight their way through the mountains? Do they force themselves to flow?" The young man shook his head. "No, Master, they simply flow, finding their way." The monk nodded. "They do not resist the rocks. They do not fight the bends. They flow, but they are not lost. They follow their own path, but they are guided by a deeper current." The monk turned to the young man. "True freedom is like that river. It is not the absence of obstacles, but the presence of flow. It is not about silencing your thoughts, but about not being carried away by them. It is not about avoiding suffering, but about meeting it with awareness. It is not about escaping life, but about seeing life clearly." The young man's eyes widened. "But how, Master? How do I see clearly? How do I flow without being lost?" The monk's smile deepened. "By becoming the observer, my child, by understanding that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that watches them. You are not your emotions. You are the space in which they rise and fall. You are not the stories you tell yourself. You are the silence beneath them." The young man's breath caught. "But I feel so lost. Master, I feel so small, so weak." The monk gently placed his hand on the young man's shoulder. "A wave may feel small when it rises, but it is always part of the ocean. You are not just this moment of fear, this moment of doubt. You are the vast awareness in which all moments rise and fall." A tear slipped down the young man's cheek. "But how do I hold on to this awareness? How do I keep it?" "You do not hold on," the monk whispered. "You return to it, again and again, with each breath, with each step, with each moment, like the river returns to the sea, like the leaf returns to the earth. You return to yourself." The young man looked out at the vast horizon, his heart swelling with a quiet, profound peace. "So true freedom is not something I gain. It is something I remember." The monk's smile was a sunrise. "Yes, freedom is your nature. It is the silence behind your thoughts, the stillness beneath your fears, the awareness that watches without judgment, without attachment. It is the home you have never left." The young man bowed deeply, his tears now a quiet stream. "Thank you, Master. I see now. I see that I was never truly lost. I was just asleep." The monk's gaze softened. "And now you are waking up." Together, they stood in that sacred silence. The vast sky above them, the endless world below. The monk's journey was not one of escape, but of return. A return to the simplicity of being, to the quiet strength of awareness, to the deep, unshakable peace of knowing who he truly was. And as the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of gold and crimson, the monk turned and began his descent, his staff tapping softly against the earth, his prayer beads slipping gently between his fingers. But now, Each step was not just a step, it was a reminder. A return. A silent affirmation of the truth he had discovered. True freedom lies not in changing the world, but in changing how you see it. True freedom is not the absence of suffering, but the awareness that suffering is a passing cloud in the vast sky of your mind. True freedom is not in being unshaken by the storm, but in being the vast, open sky that holds both the storm and the sunlight. As the monk disappeared into the forest, his figure bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. His words echoed in the young man's heart. Return to yourself, again and again. In the silence of your heart, you will find the freedom you have always sought. And so, the story of the monk became not just a journey of his own, but a mirror for all who heard it. A reminder that true freedom is not something you chase, but something you remember. It is the quiet, unwavering awareness that you are not the storm. You are the sky. The awakening is yours. As the story of the monk comes to an end, his journey is not just a tale to the monk's wisdom, his peace, his freedom. They are not his alone. They are yours to claim, yours to live, yours to remember. True freedom is not something you find outside. It is not a distant prize to be won. It is the quiet, unwavering awareness within you, the silent observer that watches without judgment, that loves without condition, that lives without fear. If this journey has touched your heart, if you have felt the whisper of truth in your soul, I invite you to take a step further. Join our community. Subscribe to Buddhism in Every Moment, where we explore the depths of wisdom, peace, and awakening. Share this story with those who may need it. Comment your thoughts below, and let your voice be a part of this journey. And remember, the world around you may change, but the peace within you is always there. Return to it, again and again. You are not the storm. You are the sky.